Good evening everyone, my name is Heather and as part of the Wandsworth Heritage Festival I'm going to be doing a video for you. Now it's a while since I've done a video from here in my house, but it's really lovely to be back here. Now this video is all about homes, but as you can see I've got lots of strange things in front of me. So in a little while you're going to be finding out a bit more about what sort of homes we're going to be talking about and building this evening. Now, I did have grand plans to film this video outside in the garden, but to be honest, it doesn't seem to have stopped raining for the entire month, which is why we're inside. But the things that I'm going to be building homes for are very definitely living in the garden. So once we finish this, this is going to go and live outside. Now, you don't need a garden to build one of these. In fact, you can do it if you've got a balcony, or even you can hang it outside your door, because what we're talking about this evening is making bug hotels. So the theme of this year's Wandsworth Heritage Festival is homes, then and now. And I thought it would be a very good idea if we thought about providing homes for some of the very small creatures that live around us, because everyone's happier with a home. And there are lots of really beneficial insects that live around us that could really help having a little bit more space to live in, because they do lots of good for us. Now, there are all sorts of bees. Now, everyone knows about bees that live in beehives, but there are lots of bees that live on their own. There are solitary bees and burrowing bees and leafcutter bees. And as well as that, there are moths and beetles and all sorts of creatures that really just need a little nook or space to hide in, especially over the winter, to keep them safe so that they continue being beneficial to our gardens, because there are bees that pollinate the plants, there are insects that feed off of all sorts of plants as well, there are spiders that eat pests, so there are lots of creatures that can benefit from having a bug hotel to live in. Now, what can you make a bug hotel out of? Well, it's really, really simple. So the one that I'm going to show you today, anyone can make, and you can make it out of anything you've got around you. And I've been collecting all sorts of things for some time to make my bug hotel with. So I'm going to show you how to make one now, and then we'll look at how we might be able to use some of these other things. So the first thing you need is a container. Now, you can make a really small bug hotel just out of something like a single tin can. As long as it's cleaned out, you can use that, but I'm going to make mine a little bit bigger. Now, you can make really massive, giant, big ones. If you look on the internet, you can see bug hotels made out of stacks of pallets, even out of bricks and things like that. But this one, I'm going to use an old biscuit tin. If you are using a tin, make sure it's an old one that you don't want to use anymore. Alternatively, you can make one by cutting up a milk carton. So you can cut your carton, either cut off the front or cut it in half. You could use a flower pot, large or small, or you could use some kind of cardboard box. But remember, if you are using a cardboard box and you're putting it outside, it's got to go under something or be wrapped in plastic, so that otherwise, when it rains, it's going to get very soggy and very dilapidated. Okay. So what I'm aiming to do is I'm aiming to fill up this tin with lots of things that will create lots of different habitats where different creatures will like to come and live. So first of all, this isn't going to make a very comfy, cosy house, is it? So I'm going to start by filling up some of the space with some tins that I've collected. And then inside the tins, I can put different things to make a different sort of bedding for each one. So let's see if I can fill up this space with tins. I've been collecting them for some time. They're all nice and washed and clean. If you are using tins, make sure, be very careful they haven't got sharp edges around the top, and do make sure they're clean. If they've got paper labels, you don't need to take those off because they're biodegradable. Now, I am trying to avoid using small bits of plastic in this because I don't want them to break down and become microplastics, because microplastics are tiny, tiny grains of plastic that stay in the environment for ages. And I'm going to try and use things that are either biodegradable or that won't degrade at all, like these cans. Okay, so I put in some cans, and I'm going to fill in some of the gaps in the cans with these cardboard tubes so that they're nice and tightly packed. That's a good one. can in. There we go, that's good. And some more cardboard tubes. One in there. One in there. Lovely, that fits in beautifully. So now you can see I've filled up the space with cans. So I've got lots of different size circles and spaces that are going to make houses. So now we can start to fill up some of the gaps in these cans. So I've got lots of different materials. So what should we start with? So I've got some paper bags. So I'm going to open out my paper bags and rip them into some smaller pieces. There we go. And I'm going to scrunch them up a little bit. And I'm going to, let's find a gap. In the top corner here, there's quite a nice gap. I'm going to stuff some of the paper down into that gap. Lovely. Bit more. Remember, I'm wanting to leave some quite big holes and spaces in this paper so that something can crawl inside there and find a little home. Now, what else have I got? I've got a lovely piece of bark, which is rotting away nicely. Now, my niece Hazel found me this, and she found me some of these pine cones as well. So let's see if we can fit that in somewhere. It's quite big. I think it will fit in one of those cans. Let's see if we can wedge it in. Okay. Now, I'm not too bothered if the bits stick out of here. Now, you can cut them off and make them more neat. That does stick out quite a lot, but don't worry, I'm going to put that down the bottom, I think. Like that. So we've got a rotten old piece of bark there, which is going to provide a lovely home for lots of things. Now I've got lots of twigs here, twigs from different plants and trees. So let's see if we can fill up some more of the space with twigs. So I'm going to do that for one of the cans. Let's use the big one. I've got a coffee can here, which is the tallest one I've got. I'm going to poke in lots of twigs. Now, one thing all this rain and wind has done is it's brought lots of twigs off the tree, so there's plenty lying around now. You don't always get so many at springtime. There we go. So other things that you could collect, and you can collect them throughout the year, could be dried grass, dried leaves, all sorts of things you can use. So I'm filling up this space with twigs. Now I don't want it packed so tight there's no gaps in between, but what I do want is for the twigs to fit nicely in there so that they don't slide around and fall out. Lovely. Let's keep going with a few more. In it goes. As I say, if they're too long, I'm going to break them down a bit shorter, but I'm not too worried if they stick out. Good. So we've now got some twigs in here. So this tin can is full of twigs, and this one's got a lovely piece of bark in there. Now what else have we got? I've got some absolutely fantastic pine cones. Those are wonderful. And inside all the gaps here, now they've opened up and the pine knots have come out, there'll be lovely spaces there for small creatures to live. So let's find a space for that one. Oh, that fits in there beautifully. So we've got one pine cone fitted in there. And let's see if we can put one of its friends in. I've got some smaller pine cones here. They might fit in too. Oh yeah, lovely. So push that one down and I can get another one in on the top there. Lovely. So we've got some pine cones. And I've got some dried leaves here. So these are actually dried leaves from a bay tree that I've got in my garden. Now, I don't think the insects will mind, but they do smell really nice. So I'm going to tuck some of those down one of the cracks in the side. Oh, there's a little crack at the top there, so let's fill that up with dried leaves. Just pop them down inside. And a few more. Lovely. So we've put some scrunched up paper. We've put some old rotten bark. We've put some twigs. We've put a really large pine cone and a couple of smaller pine cones. Now, I've got some lovely moss here. This is really beautiful stuff, nice and dry, really warm and cozy, will make a lovely bed. So I'm going to push that into some of the cracks as well. down inside. This is really simple to do. You don't even need any cutting or gluing. All you need to do is collect up lots of lovely materials and then find a container to put them in. And again, you can use any container that you've got. You could use an old plastic pot. As I say, this is just an old biscuit tin, but whatever you've got that you can find, as I say, you can make a tiny individual one just out of a single tin can, or you can make several of them and scatter them around. So I've put some moss in there now. It's looking really interesting. Right, what else can we put in? So I've got these are some bits of broken flower pots. So let's see if I can wedge a couple of those in to make a few larger spaces for larger creatures to crawl in. It'll help keep everything tightly wedged. Just small pieces, I think, because I haven't got that much space. And again, don't go around smashing your flower pots especially, but this one broke in the winter frosts. So we've wedged in some bits of flower pot there, and it's helping to keep everything nice and tight. It's not going to fall out now. Okay, so what else am I going to do? I've got, yes, these are quite nice. Lots of pine needles that I found, some nice long bits of pine needle. So let's fill up one of the cans with these. Now, this pine has got quite a lot of resin in it, so even though it's dry, it's still quite difficult to break. So I'm going to cut this with scissors, but as I say, it only really needs scissors to cut. But if you need an adult to help you with this bit, do. That's it. So I'm going to cut down the pine needles, and we're going to stuff those into one of the other cans. Lovely. It's like a witch's broom. In they go, and I've got some more there, so let's fill up all the space, because again, we want each can to be filled up with something different, and not packed tight, but tight enough that the contents don't fall out easily. Okay. There we go. Let's cut a few more, snip, snip, and in they go. Push them in nice and tight. So we've got some pine needles in this one. So I've got this one full of pine needles, this one with the big piece of bark, and some twigs, and small pine cones and large pine cones, and there's moss in the gaps in between. Looking really good. This is such a simple and quick thing to do. Okay, now I've got some tiny little pine cones here. You can hardly even see them on the camera. These are from an older tree, and you find these near water. They're quite common. You get them on the streets as well, and they've got lovely weeny little cones. So let's see what I can put those in. So I'm going to pop those into one of the cardboard tubes, I think. There we go. Let's fill that one up with alder cones. We'll push them in. And so they're really dinky little pine cones, these ones. Or alder cones, rather. It's a great way when you're going around looking for things as well to find out about different species of trees and what sort of fruits and twigs they have. Okay, lovely. Poke the twiggy bits in, and then they should stay put. Lovely. They're staying put nicely as well. So in this little cardboard tube at the bottom, toilet roll tube, I've put the tiny little alder cones. That's looking really good. What I'll do is I'll take a photograph of this and I'll post it as well so you can see it a bit better. So I've got 2 cans left over, so let's see what else we can put in them. So I've also got something else down here. This is some really nice packing material. So this is sort of sawdusty packing material. It's obviously environmental packing material, which I'm really pleased about. And this is lovely stuff. So it's just wood shavings. Smells nice and clean. And it said it was biodegradable, and it doesn't seem to have any plastics or anything in. So I'm going to use some of that. I'm going to put that into one of the cans. This is beautiful. It smells lovely as well. I think it's from pine trees again. Nice shavings. If I was an insect, I think this would make a really cosy little bed to stay in. That's great. In fact, I think I'm going to put that in one of the other cardboard tubes as well. So let's have a couple of those stuffed with that. Looking really good. So there we go. So we can see that one's full of wood shavings. Brilliant. Now I've got a couple more spaces left. So let's do another one of twigs. Let's do another big can of twigs. Canned twig doesn't sound very nice, does it? And these were collected some time ago, so they're nice and dry, so they're really easy to snap. So there are lots of butterflies and moths that might lay their eggs and they turn into caterpillars, and they munch and munch and munch in the summer, and then in the winter they turn into pupa or a chrysalis, and they will spend the whole winter in their pupas, gradually turning into a moth or a butterfly. So it's a chrysalis for a butterfly and a pupa for a moth. And then in the spring, that's when they'll hatch out. So they need little places to stay all winter. And a lot of people's gardens now are quite tidy. People like to have a very tidy garden. And the problem with a really tidy garden is that it doesn't leave anywhere for all these creatures to live. And we really need them. They've been part of our world actually for a lot longer than we have, and we need them to keep us going because, as I said before, there are lots of bees that pollinate the plants, and when they pollinate the plants are able to make seeds and fruit, and without seeds and fruit we would have nothing to eat. So it's very important that we provide homes for creatures, apart from the fact that they deserve them too. Okay, that's looking really good now. So that one's full of twigs as well. So I've got just a couple of little spaces left, and let's see what else I've got. So now I did bring some quite big stones, but I'm not sure that I've got space for those, but we can look at using them in something else. I've got some eggshells here. So I'm going to fill up some of the spaces with some of these leftover eggshells. So again, eggshells are really great for doing things with. Just make sure you wash them out, okay? Because you don't want them full of nasty, slimy egg. So I'm going to just gently break some of these up, and I'm going to push them down inside the cardboard tubes. So we'll fill them full of eggshells. Now, obviously eggshells are quite brittle, so we want to be a bit gentle. We don't want to break them into powder. I'm just going to break them into big chunks. Lovely. So to stop the eggshell falling out the top, I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of moss in there. That's great. Okay, well, I reckon this is getting on to being finished. I can see I've got one more space there, one more cardboard tube. So let's fill that up with some bits. I've got lots of these leftover pine needles just lying loose on the table, so we'll put some of those in just to use them up. In you go. And then I've got some smaller twigs here as well. So let's fill this last cardboard tube with little twigs like this. So anyone should be able to do this, even if you need a little bit of help. So it's a really suitable thing for even really quite young children to do. The one thing you must remember is that when you've done your bug hotel and you've found it a place to live, just leave it there, okay? Because just like you don't really want people disturbing you in your bed in your house, the insects and creatures that live in there won't want you disturbing them either. But keep an eye out, because you might see things, particularly when the spring weather comes and the weather starts to warm up, emerging from your bug house. Now, this is something that you can make now, and you can put it in your garden, because it will give you a good time all summer and into the autumn for the insects to find it and find a nice place to hide. And then come next spring, you might find some little things are crawling out of it. So I've pretty much finished my bug house now. As you can see, I've stuffed all the spaces with different materials, and we've got lots of lovely natural materials in there. So all that remains is for me to find a place for this to live in my garden. Now, I could just plonk it out in the lawn, but that wouldn't be very sensible. I'm going to find it a little corner, probably somewhere underneath a shrub or a bush. In fact, I've got a shed at the end of the garden, and I'm probably going to tuck it around the side of the shed, so it's sheltered from the weather and it won't get knocked over. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the lid of the tin. I might just use a little bit of glue on this, but I'm not going to do it now, to make a sort of lid for this. So I'm going to put it on its side like this, find a little corner to wedge it in, and then I'm going to use the lid of my biscuit tin just to go over the top there. I could glue it, or I could just weight it down with some rocks outside, and that's going to make a lovely home for lots of creatures to live in. So that's one quite simple bug hotel, but as I said, you can make an even smaller one just using a single tin can. So if you've got a single tin can, you can fill it up with a mixture of materials. So I'm going to use a few different bits and pieces in this little one. So let's start with some of this lovely sawdusty packing, and we'll put some of that in, and then we'll put in a few little twigs. There we go. So we'll make some different spaces in this tiny little one. Lovely. And I've got another cardboard tube there. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to squash it up so it's got some little holes in there. And we're going to pack that in. So we're just aiming to fill it up nice and snugly. A few more twigs in there. Just keep going until it feels like the things are in reasonably firmly, so that they're not going to come falling out again. There we go. So that's quite nice and tightly packed now with twigs and sawdust. So what you could do is you could wedge that into a little corner, or you could attach a string to it. And you could hang it either from a tree, or if you've got a balcony, you can hang it from your balcony, tie it up nice and tight. You could even hang it outside a window or on a windowsill, and that will provide just a little bit of space for, say, some little creatures to come and hide and live in. So that's a very, very simple way to make another really basic bug hotel. And you don't even need to make anything as elaborate as this. You can just set aside a little corner in your garden, and you can do something as simple as making a little stack of things. So these, again, some of the things that I've collected. So I'm going to take these pine cones. Oh, these lovely big pine cones. They've got lots of spaces inside, and you can just stack them up. And you can make a little stack of twigs and arrange them. And again, maybe you could use some bits of broken crockery over the top. And as long as it's in a quiet little corner, something like that, again, will provide a lovely little home for insects, places for them to crawl into and hide when it's cold. And even something as simple as leaving some old twigs that are rotting around. This one's got lots of lovely lichen and moss on it, because that will not only provide places for them to live, but it will also provide food for them as well. Because again, there are lots of beetle larvae that like to bore through rotten old wood, and they do a really good job of tidying up all these things as well, and turning them back into leaf mould and things that we can use in our gardens. So it's basically lovely to have a garden, but if you can find a little space in the corner of your garden to be a little bit untidy, all of nature will be much more thankful for it. And that also includes plants as well. So if you've got a little space in the corner of your garden that you can leave to go a little bit wild, especially so that it provides flowers, it will provide food and plants for lots of insects to live on. Okay, well, that was a really quite simple little fun thing to do. So what I would suggest is, whilst you're out and about, if you're on a walk, start looking at the sorts of things that you can collect to maybe make yourself a bug hotel later on in the year. Only simple things, and remember, don't pick flowers, never pick things out of people's gardens, only off the parks and commons, and only things that have fallen down. So you can pick up twigs that have fallen off trees, lots of those, Things like pine cones, again, you might be waiting till autumn for those now, but things like pine cones that have fallen off are lovely. Dried leaves that have fallen down, and you can collect up lots of recyclable things, because if you've seen any of the crafts that I've done in the past, and I'll try and look out some of the videos for you and repost them so you can see them, you'll know that I love making things out of recyclables, and you can make lots of things out of stuff that you've got lying around. And as I said, you can use some stones, little stones. You can use paper packing. As I say, I'm trying to avoid using plastic in mine. Little things like eggshells that you would have after you've done your cooking. So anything like that you can use to make a lovely little bug hotel. So I hope that you'll look at some of our other videos for Wandsworth Heritage Festival, because we've got Gillian, who's the children's librarian at Roehampton, is going to be reading some stories about the Wombles with their underground homes on Wimbledon Common. And she might be doing it in costume. And a very good friend of mine who is a local author called Kate Cunningham has made a beautiful video all about comparing and contrasting houses from the 16th century to now. So it's going to be a now and then. And the really exciting thing about that one is we're going to be having an exhibition of her work in Tootng Library. So you can come in and see her then and now house, and you can open up the flaps and see the difference between your houses today and houses how they might have been hundreds of years ago. And finally, I'm very much hoping that in the summer, we'll be able to do this craft event as one that you can come into the library and participate in. Because by then, I'm really hoping we'll be able to do some events with you again in the library. We've really missed you. And our summer reading challenge this year is called Wild World Heroes. So it's all about doing fun things for the environment, as well as reading your books and getting your stickers and medals. So I'm really hoping that we'll be able to do our bug hotel craft as a real one in the library that you can join in. So start collecting up some things, and I hope to see you again very soon. Thank you very much for joining me on this video. And for now, bye-bye from Heather in her house, and I will see you again very soon in Tootng Library. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching.